We can begin. Okay, I think I'm going to begin. So, hello everyone. My name is Elizabeth Giorgis from Sharjah, the United Arab Emirates. And thank you to Sarah Geyer and the consortium of the Humanities Centers and Institutes for inviting me to moderate this panel of new locations for the humanities on the humanities in the African continent, conversing with our panelists today about their work as it relates to creating space for the humanities and the humanities of creating place in Africa. Some household technical stuff before we begin to everyone. Your camera and microphone will be muted. The chat will be open throughout the presentation and visible to other attendees as well as to the panelists. Attendees are encouraged to engage with presentation through the chat. Delegates may also use the Q&A function to direct a question to any or call panelists found at the bottom of the screen. Live transcription is available for this session and can be adjusted using the live transcript button at the bottom. And if you have any questions or issues, please reach out by chat to Amanda Kelly, Bill Warner, or Guillaume Rattel. Having said that, it's a very exciting and interesting group of panelists from three seemingly divergent but very much interconnected fields that are particularly entangled in the production of knowledge from where they originate. Artist Ibrahim Mahama from Ghana, Senegalese anthropologist, historian, and philosopher, Dr. Abdourahmane Seck, and Ilze Wolff, architect from Cape Town, South Africa. Their impressive bios are posted in the program, so I'll not recite their bios. But just to give a brief outline of each panelist's work, Dr. Abdourahmane Seck is an anthropologist, philosopher, and historian, and is interested in building concrete links through third places between academic spaces and community initiatives for resilience, and an engagement with a critical and decolonial network. Ilze Wolff is she's concerned with an architecture of consequence. Architecture and its entanglements with societal constructions of race, gender and space, public culture around the city, space, and personhood. I was going to introduce Ibrahim. He hasn't joined us yet, so maybe Ibrahim Mahama. So if he joins later, I will introduce him. So, but I'll begin with Dr. Abdourahmane Seck and Ilze Wolff to present their talks. And hopefully the talks can ultimately foster a dialogue between them and the audience. So we'll begin with Ilze Wolff with her PowerPoint presentation and her talk on the Great Mall Project, a project in Cape Town, South Africa, which I had the opportunity to look at, and I'm really looking forward to that talk. So Ilze, let me open the floor for you. Can you go ahead?
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for the introduction. And I'm honored to share this conversation with you, Abdourahmane and Ibrahim, when he joins. Thank you so much for the invitation as well from Sarah and Bill and others that have been organizing this incredible conference. So this evening, I'm going to be sharing with you the story of the Great Mall Project. It is a building that is in the process of being refurbished for the purposes of an arts education for the Center for Humanities Research at the University of the Western Cape in Cape Town. And I thought I'd share this story in the form of a photo album. I chose that format because the project is an extensive project. It extends in time more than 3 years in planning and now also in construction. But before that, it was also a process of imagining, primarily within the Center for Humanities Research under the auspices of Professor Ramesh Lalu, Heidi Grunenbaum, Jane Taylor, and others. So it's impossible for me to actually give you the full picture in 15 minutes. So I'm going to be sharing a few photos to kind of give you a sense of the vast imagination that is behind this incredible project. Let me just share the screen. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Can you hear me properly also?
Yes, I can, yes.
Okay, all right. The first photograph is an image of part of the building, and it is essentially what we are planning to be the front door of the building. The front door of this incredible new building was not in this particular position originally. It was in a completely other location, as I will explain later. But we chose this as the front door because it used to be the entrance for this particular building for where primary school girls and infants would enter this facility. This building is a building that dates from 1912 as a union government primary school. And the pedagogical layout of the building determined that there were separate entrances for separate learners. The boys entered on another side of the building, and staff and public and teachers would enter on the other side. This is a photo of the site from the sky, from a drone. It's a drone image of the building under construction. I recently heard a quotation of an architect that said, there are two ways to get to know a city. The one is from, and he was talking particularly of Paris. And the one way of viewing the city would be from the Eiffel Tower, and another view would be from the street view. And both parts of that story is, both views are valid. This happens to be the Eiffel Tower view of Great Moor, but it's useful for us to explain the location quickly. On the left-hand side, if you can see my cursor, is the historic Great Moor Street. And on this side is Devon Street. Over here, you have Regency Street. And beyond this boundary, you have the main road of Woodstock. Great Moor Street is an important street in this story because it was the border of where the apartheid government chose to divide up the suburb of Woodstock according to racialized identities. On the left-hand side would be where so-called non-Europeans would be located. And on the right-hand side, where the school facility is, would be where so-called Europeans were located. So apartheid planning determined the location of government facilities, and Great Moor Street happens to be on the side where the privileged white population was located. So the school was imagined for a working class white population in 1912, just shortly after the Union government of South Africa was initiated. So Great Moor Street and the building finds itself right on the cusp of a kind of a racialized apartheid border, which is very important for us to begin to imagine a way out of those very rigid borders and to begin to also disrupt apartheid spatialities. This is a map of what the suburb looked like just before the construction of the facility. So interestingly enough, the street was not called Great Moor Street, it was called Great Moor Street. And you can find it on an old sewage map of Woodstock, proposing the sewage outline for the entire city in 1891. So later on, this would also become the border for these new publics, but the actual border for Woodstock was on this street here, which is Durham Avenue, and the other municipal border for Woodstock was Searle Street. So Woodstock has been sort of, you know, divided up according to these racialized identities, and Greatmore Street is sort of right on the edge of that, as you can see here. But also what you see in this plan is that the urban fabric begins to change its orientation. So all the plots facing on this side of Greatmore Street face the harbor and the mountain, whereas the plots on this side have been squeezed in between streets to face another orientation. This is also a very important point for our building, because it's one of the rare buildings in Woodstock that has an incredible view of both the mountain and the sea. Is it possible that you could show the drone image, please? The drone footage, so that we can have a better sense of the location of the neighborhood. It's about a 2-minute video showing the building under construction. And this is a view from Devon Street. On that side, you see Regency Street, and on the other side, you see Greatmore Street. So you can see that the neighborhood is quite densely planned with a kind of a fine-grained urban fabric, with this enormous and quite generous facility located right in the middle of an open piece of land, which is incredibly luxurious for such a dense part of town. In front over here would have been the playground, which was divided in the middle, on the left-hand side for girls, on the right-hand side for boys. This would have been the entrance for girls, and on this side would have been for boys. But over here, this was a kind of basement open play area for children during winter times. The building's main feature is a courtyard in the middle, which was meant to actually just supervise children so that they go to the correct classes and they don't sort of dawdle around. And the facility was completely duplicated on either side. You have a staircase over here and a staircase on that side to make sure that the genders are continually being separated. On the southern court, the same thing applies. In 1912, the building would not have had a facility for ablutions. So the ablutions were located on the other side of the building. It's a busy site. So most of the site on the back side is being currently occupied by the contractors. Okay, so we can move out of this. And another important feature of the history of this building is that it was very close to the sea. In 1911, which is the year prior to its construction, or prior to its imagining as a design at least, the coast of Cape Town was quite close to the railway. So Woodstock is not, Woodstock is more or less, the beginnings of Woodstock is in the corner of this map, and the mouth of the Salt River flowed right into the sea here. Our building is more or less sitting on this location, and the proximity to the sea was much closer. Later on, they would have, in 1939, with the land reclamations, the part of the city actually became quite further away from the sea as parts of the bay was reclaimed, and industrialization kind of claimed that side of the city. So Greatmore Street is over here, and the site for this building is situated here with a railway on that side, and the original line of the bay over here with land reclamations extending into the sea. So in a sense, what we have from 1899 to 1939, and then with the construction of the building is a landscape that is changing quite dramatically through industrialization, as well as through kind of ecological and major shifts in the way land is occupied. But we also have a kind of a beginnings of this racialized city emerging, and facilities like the Greatmore School then being part of that fabric. An image of the Woodstock Beach. And then finally, this is one of the few images I was able to find of the original building in the background. And this would have been during the time where Greatmore Street was declared a white neighborhood. So what you see in this image is a kind of a very decorative building with tiles and teak window frames with shutters and pivot windows on that side, which was completely stripped in the 1960s in order for the government or provincial government to be able to maintain it properly. We now move our photo album to a completely different side of the country. This is an image taken by Paul Grendon, who is a photographer who at one point was located within the Center for Humanities Research as a artist in residence. And during the time that I was engaging with the center around the architectural intervention for Greatmore, I had a question around what would be the appropriate spatial practice, or what is the kind of spatial practice that is inherent within the University of the Western Cape. And that question took me through the archives of UWC and the archives of the CHR, and this image became quite pivotal, not only for this story, but also for my practice and for our practice as a whole. Because what you see in this image is a woman called Katrina Majid, who is constructing her home in a place called Sundrift in the Northern Cape with material that she found on site. And what she is doing is that she is constructing this home with a kind of strength that is captured by the photographer in a particular pose. And with this action of bending the construction, the material that she's going to use, somehow I feel it is connected to this water tower, and the water tower being a kind of a symbol of a kind of a modern infrastructure. So there's a kind of a connection between her construction, which is a domestic dwelling, with a kind of a very intensive or intentional link with the wider urban infrastructure. But more importantly, what you see in this photograph is what I consider a complete debunking of my architectural training, at least, where we were taught that you conceive of buildings as abstract empty spaces. And once you've conceived and designed and presented your designs, the users and the people that are going to be using the building, either as dwellings or as institutions, will then have to come and fill this empty abstract space afterwards. What Katrina Majid is proposing is that is a complete contradiction of that idea, where she's actually constructing around the existing, the pre-existing, the resources that she's gathered, and in this case, even members of a family, as you can see with Charlene, a relative already inside the building. And this became a very important conversation between ourselves and the CHR and the university around how do you construct a structure or an existing building, as is the case with Greatmore, with or around the resources that you already have at your disposal. The resources that we had at our disposal for Greatmore is a series of incredible ideas around how to reimagine arts-based practice. We had various financial resources also through funding through the National Research Foundation. And also we had the facility. We also had the resources of an incredible team and supporting team that is continuing the support of this project. And I mean, these are just some of the resources that we have, that we've identified that we need to be constructing this building around, not the other way around. So in a sense, this project, this image becomes a kind of a mantra for how we can begin to think about institutions and buildings differently. So the design of the book, hello?
Ilze.
Sorry?
3 minutes more.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm not going to take too long. I'm going to just quickly take you through the design of the building and then through the construction. But essentially the building is a kind of a refurbishment of a series of rooms. The one being the workshop for for Okwanda puppeteers who have been mentored and supported by the Handspring Puppet Company. We have a new lobby and the courtyard space. So the site will also be completely reimagined through a kind of a new access through, because one of the main things around Greatmore is that this new front door becomes an arrival space. One of the things that we wanted to spatially disrupt with this building was the fact that you always enter through a passage. And in this case, we wanted people to arrive into a space, which is the courtyard. And the courtyard becomes this very powerful room that becomes to hold all these ideas of the center and the university as whole. Under construction and for its future imagining. These are some pictures that I took today of some of the demolition that's occurring in the lobby space. Again, the idea was to connect the building with the surrounding neighborhood quite viscerally, because this is how we think through really kind of disrupting apartheid spatialities by bringing neighborhoods right into institutions and also thinking of new ways of arriving. This is a rendering of the building's foyer, the front door leading you up into a new space, and then through a series of stairwells and staircases into the reading room space, and then a door that links directly to the street. The building has got a series of very long rooms that are interconnected through these windows. And what we wanted to do is to make extreme we wanted to take advantage of these tall volumes, these tall windows, to really bring in not just light in, but to kind of really take advantage of the character of the building. So we are not drastically kind of demolishing and making new. We're just enhancing the potential of the building through very minimal interventions and new joinery and things like that. This is just to give you a sense of the scale of these new windows and the sense of the power of reconfiguring the pre-existing in terms of how do we begin to think through and imagine new institutions for a place like Greatmore and the CHR. And then lastly, the basement, which used to be the space where the children would play on wintry days, is going to again be a space for play. But in this case, it would be a workshop for the Okwanda puppeteers. And in order to make it a practical workshop, we needed to excavate. And This is an image of the process of excavation actually ongoing today, which will directly link the workshop to the parking and to the outside neighborhood again. And that's it. I mean, this is an image just of the last sort of kind of conclusive image from this photo album. Is a view that is again about thinking about this courtyard, not as this kind of cloister space, but really how do we begin to imagine this building as an expansive space, both for the imagination, but again, to think through how, what is the boundlessness of this idea of disrupting apartheid spatialities through arts practice and architectural interventions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ilze. Thank you very much. I'm sure there'll be a lot more to talk about on the project itself. So we'll continue with Abdourahmane. Abdourahmane, I'm giving you the floor. Yeah. 15 minutes, hopefully.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thanks very much, Elizabeth. And also I would like to thank very much Ilze for her presentations. It helps me a lot to share what I want to share today with you. So I was very struck while she was speaking by some words, you know, like archives, building, rebuilding, and history also. And I was keeping asking myself, inhabiting a place, you know, and from this idea of, from this wandering of, in the double sense of wandering and also wandering as inhabiting a place, how we can move to the matter that will concerns me here mostly inhabiting history. So from where I am speaking, I can say it's a very small city, very small town. It used to be the capital of the French colonial system in West Africa. And his name is Saint Louis. And as you know, Saint Louis is the name of a former king of France. So today here in 2020, I'm speaking from Africa, from a city that the name is Saint Louis. So this is something very important that brings me to speak not really about buildings, but also it will be a matter of buildings. You know, it will be also a matter of architecture, because it's all about temporality. So from which temporality I'm gonna go to speak is my first question. So this temporality has been captured within a title of what is actually our project. And that title is Nar Demb Aktay. That is a wall of words. And this wall of words means Nar is the local names or the local language name of Saint Louis. And Demb Aktay means the past and today's. Past and today. So then Nar Demb Aktay, Legacies in Motion, a critical study and action project. So this is the point. Now, how all this has started? I can say it was quite last year at the beginning of the pandemic. And what happens at that time? It happens that suddenly in our very daily and peaceful way to live day after days, we hear from the news and also from our governments that there is a great chance that in very few moments or in very few times, we all could die. And we not all could die, but we will gonna die as insects, lot of dyings everywhere. So what was very incredible in this history is the political words who brings this to us. It was like what may happen will be our own fault. So the governments, the people, they are managing these countries like 60 years after the independence. It was like they were saying to us that if you guys, you could be die, that's because it is your fault in a certain way, because you're not very much disciplined. You're not probably work. So that a lot of it. And this way to make us feel like we were the responsible of what could happen has brought kind of very important materials to build what we will build later. And these materials has been the hunger. So it provoked something I can call here a hunger. So then the group I want to talk about, the African Group for Critical Action and Studies that we are here in St. Louis, has born based on this hunger and based on this political nonsense narrative from which we wanted to live and to build something new, something different, you know. So that's the story on this. And that's why also we said that how we can present in one single word the group we are, we is. The group we is the single word is we come from where we are going. We come from where we are going, answering its injunctions, but also inventing its horizons. That's why I was talking about a temporality, inhabiting a temporality. So when we say that we come from where we are going, it means so then we don't have a physical space. The physical space is of course very important, but we want to deal with kind of symbolic materials, with kind of political materials, and to work on history. History is our materials of work, our field works in a certain way. So then it was using this COVID-19 context to try to construct and to build some barrier gestures, but these barrier gestures were not a barrier gestures against our neighbors or the people we can cross with them, you know, by going to do our stuff anywhere. But these barrier gestures was properly against the whole history who has led us to think that we could be the responsible of what could happen to us. So it was this, and we constructed this temporality with a lot of help. A help with people at the same times in several other places were also suffering about this pandemic context, was in a certain way, I can say, was targeted in a certain way. So that's why in this network we have, it's not only people coming from St. Louis or Ndar, but it's also people coming from Asia, coming from America, you know, and here in place, not only coming from academia, but also people, they are workers, they are volunteers, they are people who can do any kind of stuff, because we don't have an academia specificity into this. So then with that group, we were building, we built actually a blog about COVID-19, and our ideas was through these critical actions to build critical knowledge, a knowledge who can emancipate, and a knowledge who could plead for us that we are not the responsible of this situation. And this situation indeed have some guilty guys, you know, and that has been designed quite by purpose. So then this blog was kind of, for us, was then a barrier gestures, but a political barrier gestures, we wanted to say. And I think that's I can say, that was the most important things I wanted to share here. And maybe just to finish by one or two most important things we are also trying to implement. So then how to generate knowledge, co-generate knowledge through kind of new space. That's why we are talking about a third space, because the university as institution belonging to an institution is part of the problem that has led us to what we were facing at the beginning of the pandemic. So then our ideas are to build what we call here building the coming African Popular University. And this CUPAV, or building the coming African Popular University, is something very important to us. So create a place, an open place where we can co-generate emancipatory knowledges, you know. So, and this can't be happened without two kind of tools. We think that if we were discovering ourselves so fragile, so vulnerable, it's definitely due to some concrete political action. That is a consequences of something very clear. And these consequences has a name, imperialism. So then we think that this coming African Popular University must come with a kind of observatory of imperialism in Africa, because it's due to imperialism and the thief of resources and the thief of everything there around that people could thought that we may be disappear on the surface of the earth, you know, due to a virus. And to do that, we need to reframe knowledge. We need to reframe how we see ourselves. We need to reframe what we must understand from the dominant discourses, and also where we are and where we want to go. So, and this also has a name, and it is the second tools, and I will finish by this. And the name is building a media library. We can call also a decolonial media library. So that's what we are doing here in Saint Louis of Senegal, or Dakar. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Abdourahmane. So let me begin. I mean, the audience can ask questions, but let me begin the discussion, maybe to bring up some points for both of you. So maybe we can start with Ilze first. I think Abdourahmane brought a very good point about history. he talked about inhabiting history you know, usually recreating history most of the time is very contentious. Where I come from, Ethiopia, I mean, that's the biggest qualm now, you know, how to recreate history again so that it can be all inclusive, so that it can be, you know, it doesn't exclude one group from the other. So recreating Greatmore, I mean, you're recreating Greatmore through the history of apartheid. So has that been deliberated upon, or how does the history come in? Whose history is it? Whose apartheid is Greatmore going to, you know, represent? Whose apartheid, meaning whose oppression? Black, colored, which one? You know what I mean? So that has that been deliberated upon? That would be one question for you, Ilze. And the other one that I wanted to, because you're an architect too, so architecture, you know, all of both you and Abdourahmane work in your works in some capacity is honed in the conditions of African life and what it engenders. And I think that will not be hard to ignite a dialogue. So architects are working together in Africa, particularly now, I mean, in the last decade or so. As space is becoming a contentious issue in new neoliberal urbanist projects. So your own work deals, you say, the consequences of architecture. I think that is inclusive of that too. So can you talk about similar types of venture in South Africa or in other parts of the continent? Urbanism and the new urbanism and its repercussions. You know, Ilze, let me begin with you, and then I'll go to the Abdourahmane. These two questions.
Okay, so the question around whose oppression, I think that for me, I think it's around a question of maybe what Abdourahmane actually mentioned now, is that how do we conceive of emancipatory practices in general, in thinking through a project like Greatmore. For myself, I found that a project of emancipatory knowledge construction is very much around the disciplines that you somehow end up in. And I've somehow ended up in this discipline of architectural thinking and architectural practice. And my first sort of way into a project like Greatmore is to kind of unlearn some of the, you know, oppressive knowledge around architecture. And I think I've shared that a little bit in the image of Katrina Majid, and which became so profound in a way, is that how do we begin to unlearn that part of the discipline that is responsible for oppression? And I think it has to do with projecting abstract and kind of objective sense of the world from kind of a very one perspective, which actually excludes emancipatory practices, you know? So what I was just trying to think through is that what if we think about architectural thinking in the other way, you know, in the opposite, you know, where we don't begin with the empty space, but we begin with a collective thought around how we imagine. So we begin to gather first our belongings. We begin to gather first our friendships. We begin to gather first our resources. And then we build around that. And I think through that gathering, through that process of gathering, one begins to not only begin to analyze oppression quite deeply, but begin to kind of, it becomes a methodology of how we can think about various liberatory practices. So in a sense, it's a very difficult question to answer in terms of whose oppression, but I think I'd like to sort of propose a kind of an idea around an ongoing methodology, an ongoing continuity around various practices of liberation through architectural and spatial thinking.
Okay. Thank you. Abdourahmane, would you like to add to that, or you want me to ask you a question? Go to your question. Maybe I'll go to a question and then maybe you can add on that. So my thing, okay, I've read some of your interests and that you've extensively been engaged in religion, politics, immigration, and from your talk too on, you know, as an activist and organizer in the continent and with diasporic communities, about GAEC, I think, GAEC-Africa, and a network of people from all kinds of, getting together, a network of people from all kinds of professions. So can you just elaborate on that? How does, okay, so what I'm really, I mean, what sometimes you get wary, particularly in academia, because we talk about this, we talk about these things, we talk about urbanism, we talk about decolonizing knowledge, we talk about so many things, but it's not on, you know, it doesn't really materialize in the ground. You know what I mean? So, but your project, from what I read in the small amount that I read in the past couple of days, more of a network, I mean, more of an activism type of thing. So can you just elaborate on that so that we all can understand exactly how it's manifested in the continent itself, in Senegal? Maybe I think that's where you work most of the time.
Actually, you know, I can even start by that word unlearning. Ilze has shared it, because it's really a starting point. We can't not really think about these matters by just saying, okay, Senegal. Senegal is a long history. So what it has experienced in terms of colonization, colonialities, all these things is occurring with some other things like, you know, migrations, you know, these people who were obliged in a certain way to make some choice, constrained choice to move somewhere else and to be part of two space, as Abdourahmane Seck said, you know, but in terms of absence, even if they are physically in some place, we can't really say that they are in this space. So then what we try to figure out, what we try to better understand here, specifically in Saint Louis, is very linked with a very rich panorama of places and histories. That's this, it makes the links between what kind of sense may have some action taken place here in Saint Louis and what happens dans les banlieues parisiennes ou dans les banlieues in some suburbs in Lyon or in Paris, etc., etc. Because we hear some things. Some African scholars used to say that the problem African diaspora has faced all around the world will never end unless Africa start to become a little more respected, you know. So and that's something need to be built to get into this to get into at that level. What we need to deconstruct is the eyes and the narrative. So we are all talking about a continent struggling to get development. For us, for example, it's not a matter of getting into the development. You know, because thinking things this way or seeing things this ways is just accepting, is just incorporating the dominant species. And this dominant species put you like you were a pathologic things or you were not a real achieve it yet things. So how to break down this, that's what the GAEC tried to do. And that's why GAEC say, we are working on temporalities. We are working on the way that we can shift radically the way that we are building we are inhabiting the history. Africa is not a matter of underdevelopment. Africa is something that works very, very, very well. Contemporary Africa, you know, Africa coming from the history of the colonization is all a matter of extracting, and that works very well. Nobody can come here to say that, oh, you guys, you need to work again. You know, this lady is in these photographies, struggling with his wood. It's fantastic. You can say to people that they are not working enough. They work a lot. And we are really working a lot. The point is, we are in the story that no matter we could work and how far we can work, it's not gonna work, because that's not the matter of that's not the purpose of the things. So then the question here is how we create, how we consolidate this emancipatory knowledge. So then we can change the sense of the puzzle. We can rebuild the puzzle in a certain way. And I finish by this. We can do it by ignoring what today's the young Africans and also Europeans, even we call them Afro-European, has to say to us, because they are also very uncomfortable, and they are asking to know more Africa. And which Africa should we display for them? Which Africa should we invite them to build also with us? That's this the link, you know, and religions and migrations also, of course, are also embedded into this. Sorry, I was being very long.
No, that was great. Thank you so much. Yeah. So, do we have any questions? We don't have too much time, so I would like to take questions from the audience. You have any questions, Guillaume? No? Okay. Pramesh has a comment. I want to read that actually. I very much like the idea of not reducing work in Africa to immaterial labor. Pramesh has said that. So the other stuff, and who was the photographer? You answered that, right? Ilze, you answered that for them. Who was the photographer who took the picture?
Yes.
With the water car?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I think you did. I found the image of the woman building her house incredibly powerful and discursive in illuminating ways, as Abdourahmane just said that. Would the last presenter be kind enough to share the provenance of the image? Did you do that? For example, the reference, source, and how to access it possibly online?
Yes, the image is from Paul Grendon's archive. I believe the archive is currently at the UCT Special Collections. Paul Grendon has given me permission to use this image just before his passing 2 years ago, and I actually have a print that he gave me in our office, so I can also just share it, on this forum for the purposes of this kind of meditation. Exactly.
Okay, and then one more question for Ilze. Would Ilze please comment on considerations of sustainable energy in recreating these spaces? Wonderful work. Can you comment on that, Ilze?
I think sustainable energy is part of the practice of how we've been making buildings for a very long time in the continent, you know, and I think it's become a kind of a new way of thinking, because it was slowly eroded as a knowledge system, you know, but it's not something that is new for many people. If you think of somebody like Katrina Majid, I don't actually, and our practice don't believe in a kind of a special notion around sustainability. Sustainability must be a given. You know, things need to be ethically sourced and need to be ethically produced. And it needs to be part of an ecosystem of decisions around how materials are circulated. And I use the word circulated because it is around how do we circulate things so that it becomes, becomes part of a porous ecosystem. And we kind of, stay away from this ideas of sustainability as a discrete notion. It is not a discrete notion. It is a notion that should be generally embedded in any project.
Okay. One last question from Bill. How do you, for both of you, I think, how do you think your particular institutional, what happened to it? I just had it. Sorry. How do you think your particular institutional contexts and histories shape this work that you're doing? So both of you can give a brief comments on that. Abdourahmane, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think very, very, very briefly that what the institutions first inspired to us is that move to go desinstitutionalizations. I think if we can grant it the institution for something about what we are doing is just to make us more aware that we need to go to desinstitutionalization space, what we call here a third space, in order to better welcome the histories, the real daily histories we want to value more, and that institution can do in a certain way. Yeah.
Ilze, you want to comment on?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's something that Abdourahmane, you mentioned in your discussion around history as our materials. I think you said that, and it really resonated with me around how do we use our historical embeddedness to produce something imaginative and creative and disruptive as a way of repairing some of the injustice of the past. So definitely my historical background is completely, informed by how I would like to disrupt architectural space and racialized cities. So the Great Mill building is 20 minutes away from where I live. It is down the road from where grandparents and extended family worked in factories. This is the kind of story of our descendants, of our ancestors, and we are descendants of this history. So one needs to be informed by that to be able to allow new imaginings to circulate and to open up into various spaces. So we inherited this crazy facility from a crazy past with this incredible, weird duplication of services. How do we disrupt it for a new way of thinking?
Thank you, guys. So we're almost out of time. Thank you, Abdourahmane Seck, Seck and Ilze Wolff. Thank you for the consortium, for the Humanities Centers and Institutes. It was a wonderful discussion. Hopefully this will continue in another form. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Okay, bye.